Hi, I'm Kate from dailytarotgirl.com, and today I am so excited to be chatting with Jessi Huntenburg, aka the Mind Witch Mama. So Jessi Huntenburg is a mind witch, which I'm going to be asking her about in a minute. And she runs the Mind Witch Coven and the Mind Witch Academy. And she is also a tarot summer school teacher this year, along with me. So welcome, Jessi. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited to just talk and have a lovely conversation with you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you to everyone for listening.
I love your hair, by the way. You have fantastic, long, beautiful hair.
Thank you. It's somewhat of a, people in my family can grow their hair very long, very quickly. And it has been a calling card for a long time. I've had short hair a couple times, but people used to say, I think I saw you in the mall last Saturday, because they saw the back of my head and they're like, that's her hair. So it's always been a distinguishing feature and one that I totally embrace. And lately it's just gotten beyond long. And I'm like, yes, get longer, get longer. It passed its threshold. Do you have like a hair threshold? Sorry to get very basic right now, but do you have like a hair growing threshold?
Yeah, we will get onto some spiritual topics, we promise. I do have a hair growing threshold. So I've gone like years without really cutting my hair. And it kind of goes, I don't think it's ever gone like past my boobs, really.
Okay.
Like maybe a little bit, like that's as long as it goes.
I had a threshold that was like about right here until fairly recently, like I guess probably less than a year. And I noticed it past that. I'm like, what is happening? It's even longer than it's ever been. So I think this is also me like taking that for a ride, because this is the longest I've ever been able to grow my hair. So I wonder if it can get to Rapunzel length. I'm sure it'll get annoying and heavy to a point where I'm like, all right, big enough. But for right now,
yeah.
Doing the Rapunzel thing.
I flip-flop between like wanting long hair and then like wanting to cut it off and have short hair. And I kind of go back and forth between those two things, because it's such a relief when you finally cut it, right? And it's like, oh, this is so much easier having shorter hair.
That might be true if your hair is short, but if your hair is curly, it's not necessarily true. Every time I cut it and it just goes like this, I'm like, why? Why did I cut it? Why? Now I have to put product in it, and now I just let it be. It just does its thing. So it's actually
so you call yourself a mind witch.
Mm-hmm.
Not a hair witch. What exactly is a mind witch?
Now, a mind witch it's a term that I kind of came up with, I'd say, to describe what I feel is a little bit of a slightly different approach, given the whole modern witchcraft paradigm. I guess let me try to get more specific. So in terms of traditional witchcraft, there's the idea of like as within, so without, as without, so within. This idea that what you change on the inside changes the outside, and what changes on the outside changes you from the inside. And it seems to me that there has become, it makes sense. So much of what it is that we're doing spiritually, we're sharing online, and we're sharing visual representations of it, like representations of our spirituality that are very tactile, because that's what it is that we can, show. That's what it is that we can share. And I think some of the more esoteric aspects of witchcraft, it's harder to share, so it's harder for those to disseminate and reach. But for me, so much of what it is that happens inside. Like I have tools, you can look at my altar and like, yay, that's a witch's altar. But the tool is a portal, and I kind of almost see any physical thing as a portal to a spirited exploration of consciousness. And tarot is, very similar in this vein. There have been many who have said this is very similar to the approach of chaos magic. And I'd say that there are chaos magic elements to it, definitely. I think where there's a difference, at least what this is something I'm kind of building as I go, if that makes any sense. The difference seems to lie in, with chaos magic, it's like, okay, I can try on this sort of magic or that sort of magic or that sort of magic. I can, kind of immerse myself in this tradition or that tradition, et cetera, et cetera. And there does seem to be a component that kind of leaves out the beautiful energy of the receptive divine feminine. So that was kind of my goal in coming up with the name of Mind Witch Mama, is to take, you know, the mind and certain esoteric concepts and like this mind expansion element of magic and witchcraft, and try to marry it with the divine feminine in a way that softens it and also holds space for like the magical power of receptivity, and how like learning how to let go and hold space is actually incredibly powerful in its own right. And I don't think that there's as much in terms of that, or at least it's not focused on as much in certain other, you know, specific magical paradigms.
Oh, that's a really good answer. I love what you just said, and sort of exploring that the power of receptivity has been something that I've been exploring quite deeply in the last, I guess, 2 years now. And it is very powerful. And leading up to that, I was more focused on like manifestation and action and like kind of those more, I guess you could call them divine masculine sort of things. And in the last couple of years, I've switched to focusing more on being receptive and just exploring kind of how far you can go with that. And it's really fascinating.
It's incredibly fascinating. And the truth is you can go pretty far.
Yeah.
It's and something I'm actually going to focus on in the Mind Witch Coven in the coming month that I don't know if I've even told them about yet, is the magical art of receptivity, and how, you know, hold it, like you can ask for as much as you want, okay, but if you don't have a vessel or something that's prepared to receive it, like where's it going to fit, you know, where's it going to go, really? You have to, and I guess it's about cultivating this space that is ever present, that's ready to receive what it is that's coming, instead of having a wall be there. You know, if there's a wall there, then that's impenetrable, and whatever it is that you're asking, or you're calling forth, or whatever it is that you're trying to change, you know, it's probably not going to change. You can ask all you want, but if you're not prepared to receive it when it comes, it's a conundrum.
Yeah. And so how do you do that? Like, how do you help yourself open more to being receptive? How do you get into that state? What helps
So
you?
for me, meditation definitely helps. Philosophizing definitely helps. And this is again where the mind witch element comes into it. Like if I sit and listen to something that's very expansive in terms of the way that it makes me think and the perspectives that it's offering, I find almost like an opening happening in response to that, because I'm also receiving, I'm listening to that. When you sit and you meditate, you hold space for the silence, or you hold space for the sound outside of the internal dialogue. Okay, so like the whole point is to kind of silence the internal dialogue so that you can actually listen to something else other than that. So meditation really helps. Honestly, I also find that deity communication really helps for me. I am not a deist, as it were, meaning I don't believe in the objective presence of deity as like a specific form that looks like this and is this. I think of working with deity more as like working with, it's like an archetypes plus, if that makes any sense. So like you take the Empress in the tarot, and you know, deity related to the Empress archetype could be Gaia, it could also be Venus, Aphrodite, and you work with that idea, and you can actually like actively interface with it, and then have a conversation, and then you can actually receive wisdom and guidance through the archetype in that way. That's another way that I practice receiving. And also, let me think, is there, I mean, I'm sure there's plenty more. It's an active, it is a practice that is beginning to not take over, that I'm willingly allowing to play a major role in my life across the board, because I've identified my active nature and the need for balance there, the need to hold space for different ideas, for different people's needs. And it allows, when you take a step back like that and you're willing to receive and you're willing to listen, without judgment, you can actually learn. You can learn a lot very quickly, and you'll find that whatever it is that you were trying to work on so hard, especially in terms of like spiritual practice and the spiritual journey, if you just shut up for a second, the answers will actually come. Like if you're just filling the space, asking again, you can't hear unless you can just stop. Also, just sometimes just stopping, just doing nothing, like forcing myself, forcibly doing nothing through taking a walk and just finding a place to sit and paying attention to nature. It sounds like very much like the transcendentalists and the romantics, but it's amazing what sinks in when you just like watch little ants. Like I was watching, I'm sorry, I know I'm going a little bit of a tangent here, but I was like sat looking out in front of me and there was just a bunch of gnats, like in a huge cloud. And I noticed there was a group over here and someone laughed, and all of the gnats, like they were riding the sound wave, went like that. And I'm like, whoa. And it was just like a kind of a moment. I was like, I never thought that they would actually physically be reacting to sound waves as a group. So yeah, stuff like that.
Were you high? I'm just kidding. I said, were you high?
No. No. Like that's the cool thing. I think certain certain entheogenic substances can help you get there a lot easier. But if you make it a practice and you really pay attention, you begin to actually notice these things. That's really, I think that's what entheogens do, is they open the gateway to that, or they switch your awareness in a way that makes that connection much easier sometimes. But yeah, it's just like being receptive is also, I think it partially is like being a witness to what's happening around you with a certain level of remove. You're just like, oh my gosh, and you can actually just receive all the stuff. It's very cool. Even people speak of downloads, but this is a little different.
Two things I want to say. I like what you said about making something a practice and how it gets easier when you make it a practice. It's like working out, right? You're priming those muscles. Like it gets easier and easier the more you do something. I like what you said there. That was cool. And then you said just now, and I can't remember exactly what you said, but you said being receptive is about kind of being a witness and just witnessing things. And sometimes I feel like a big part of life for most of us, and like kind of the meaning of life and our purpose, is part of it is simply to be here now and witness things and observe the chaos and the beauty and all the different things that are going on.
It's amazing, and I think it's also it's a practice that can help in these times where chaos and order are they're having an argument. It's one of those times where there's huge tension between chaos and order, if we want to just look at it macrocosmically. And we are a part of this. Like all of us are a part of this. And I think sometimes to be in the midst of the fray, it can sometimes be really emotionally difficult, and even to the extent that we feel less like an active participant and more like someone who's just being flung about by everything that's happening outside of us. And so like coming and being a witness to this, I think, is essential in maintaining some sort of a perspective that helps us find a moment of peace in the midst, which I think is very important. And I think that all of us are worthy of that, no matter who we are.
Yeah. So how has your practice and your outlook changed in the last year and a half?
It has changed dramatically, I'd say. I guess you could say that, in the past year and a half, like you were saying, and this could be something that I know this is not something that's just happening to me, like for the past year or two, you've been making receptivity a larger part of your practice. I think it's what happens when we realize, due to, the swift changes that are happening outside of us that we have very little control over, we realize the necessity of taking a step back and looking at this and gaining greater perspective so that when we do act, it can be well informed. So for me, in terms of practice, there has been much more meditation. There has been more listening. There's been more me listening to deity. There's been more, I've spent more time cultivating a cosmic worldview. And if that makes, I know that sounds very abstract, but I've spent more time zooming out and thinking about the working of the macrocosm and trying again to be a witness to the working of the macrocosm, so that I can balance that with the role that I play. And so I can actually be very clear about the role that I play, and I can be very intentional. I think it's very tempting in terms of, like, I still cast spells, but I think the way that I've done this has changed. Like, usually the new moon, I'll be like, okay, what do I want to bring into being for this month? What do I want to bring into being this month? And it's very much, you know, what do I want to accomplish and achieve in my business? What do I want? It's been very much in the material world, or very much in that, like, pentacles space, if you will. And I've been shifting things so that what it is that I'm focusing on is less like, I want to do this within a lunar month, and it's been much more focused on what it is that I want to let go of. It's been focused on, you know, not necessarily what I want to get done in terms of goals A, B, C, D, E, or F, or G, but it's like, well, what do I actually want to do here? Like, what do I want this to do? What is the point of this beyond income? Which income is always important. If you are if you work for yourself, you know, you have to, of course, support yourself. You have to keep in touch with the pentacles. We need the pentacles in our life. But for me, I think it's been more of like, what do you want this work to do beyond that? If that makes any sense. Like, what?
Yeah, that does make sense. And I like what you said about kind of zooming out and focusing on the macro, like focusing on the big picture. And, you know, I think that helps you stay sane too, especially when it feels like the world that we're living in, it feels like it is kind of collapsing. Like, it does feel like society is collapsing, and I think that it will continue to. Like, that's kind of that's how it feels to me. Does it feel that way to you?
It does. I mean, of course, this is something that we've all been thinking about to differing degrees for a while now. And it's something that I think about every day. And it's something that in witnessing, I try to pay attention to and see. I see it. And also it's not cool that it's happening, okay? But when you're able to kind of step back and see it and be like, okay, this is happening, you're also able to get the perspective that you're reminded that, like, and the wheel goes round and the wheel goes round and the wheel goes round, and things fall apart and things, and that also, if you pay attention to the way that the world works, that things need to fall apart to make space for new things to come again. And that's just like a basic principle of life in this dimension, universe, whatever, this place that we all share, that we're all like in consensus reality, like we're all here on this earth. That is just a very, you just see it everywhere. That's just how it works, you know? And when it happens on such a grand scale in the way that it appears to be happening now, it can be utterly terrifying, because we're aware of it. In a very visceral sort of way. Like, we can look in the way that, as far as I know, you know, no other creature on this planet anyway can look 20 years into the future and predict what might occur, and can take a look at what's happening now and see forward. You know, with our level of awareness, it's almost like we can all look to the future and make premonitions. And sometimes they don't look so good. Sometimes, and even scientific, it's like, oh, here's the scientific, you know, you have the premonition of the tarot reader who reads in that way, tarot as like a form of absolute divination that can tell the future. And here you have the scientist reading data saying that this is going to happen. And then sometimes you can be the witness and look around and you can, like, you know, A plus B equals C, and you can kind of feel it in your heart that something's going on, and it becomes harder and harder to ignore all of the things. So it can be deeply, deeply overwhelming for a single being to hold that knowledge. That knowledge it's really intense. And like, not to make it biblical, but you know, Adam and Eve were chilling until they ate of the tree of life, and then guess what? Shit was desolate and hard.
Yeah, I've become kind of obsessed with this idea of societal collapse, and that has led me to start looking into other societies and cultures that fell apart over, you know, the course of our history. And so I've been reading lots of books on that topic, and it's so fascinating to me how something can be so stable and so solid for so long. You know, some of those empires existed for nearly 1,000 years and then fell apart. And there's something terrifying about that, but also exciting. Like, and I feel kind of bad saying that, but like there's something almost, it's a sense of relief in a way. And this idea of things collapsing feels at the same time like terrifying, but also like a sense of relief. I don't know if that makes any sense.
I can kind of, it does make sense. And I think it's the relief is like accepting the reality of how things work. And it's easy to live in an illusion that things don't fall apart when things aren't falling apart. And it's much harder to maintain that illusion when you see things. I mean, it can be done. Obviously, we see it happening everywhere, but it becomes much, much harder to maintain that illusion when so much around you is breaking it. And there is, you know, there is a sense of, you know, go back to Shakespeare, like the truth will out. Like when things that we all suspect but aren't sure of come to light, it's almost like it's I don't know, it's just like, oh, I thought so, and and it's almost like the mystery of that at least is revealed. But it also, I think, it connects you to something much larger than yourself. And I don't know if that is the same as relief. But for me, I think we're all finding a way to try to cope. And I think that that's healthy.
Yeah.
And we're all trying to find ways to look at this so that we can continue to live despite this. And for me, it's the deep knowledge and awareness that this has happened before, that we're not the only ones, that this, and it almost creates in a godless world, you know, not entirely, it creates a sense of kinship with those who have come before us. And it kind of places us within this legacy of the birth, death, rebirth cycle in a way that's almost like tangible, almost.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. And I think also for me, what helps me cope is this knowledge or belief that I have that I incarnated in this time on purpose, and I knew that this was going to happen. And maybe that was why I wanted to live in this time period. I don't know. But sometimes like just thinking of it that way makes you feel like less of a victim.
Yeah, I think it's important during times where we have so little control over so much that's happening, to be very cognizant of what we do have control over. For me, the serenity prayer is kind of like a little like touchstone for me. It's like, yeah, there's wisdom in knowing what you can influence and what you cannot. And honestly, if you just want to bring it back to the witchcraft thing, that's like just kind of good magic. It's like, you know, you want your magic to flow with ease. You want it to, you know, you want things to come in a very fluid way. And, you know, we're all responsible for this in one way or another. I'd say some of us are more responsible than others. And I'd also say that there are systems beyond the individual that are juggernauts, that become their own entity, their own living, breathing thing that we give birth to. And then we can say like, oh, the horror, oh, the horror. And it's almost like, the creation of Frankenstein, like, oh, the horror, like, look at this that we've made. And it has taken on a life of its own. And
like the internet, like that's like one thing that I think has taken on a life of its own and has had so many unintended consequences that we would have never predicted.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask you about astral travel?
Yes, I've actually been thinking a lot about this today.
Okay, because I know that's something that you do, that you're into, and astral travel has been something that has fascinated me for years, and I've read many books on it, and I've tried many exercises and tried to do it, and I've had zero success. I have had a lot of success with lucid dreaming. I have lucid dreams all the time now, but I've never been able to astral travel. So I want to ask you about, how you discovered astral traveling and kind of how you do it, what helps you do it, and yeah.
Okay, so I've been thinking a lot about this because my take on what astral travel is, or what it encompasses, is incredibly broad in a way that rubs some people the wrong way.
Ooh, okay.
And it's something that I'm actually thinking of today because I'm preparing a response kind of like why I feel the way that I feel. Okay. So when people say, I think a lot of times when people say like astral projection, they immediately think of the out of body experience where the spirit leaves the body and goes flying, and basically you are in a completely different level of consciousness where you separate, where your mind, where your body and your being separate. Okay. Now, I think that is something that is achieved honestly often through trance state, through shamanism in its various forms, and it can be something that's also achieved through the use of entheogenic substances like LSD, like ayahuasca, etc. Okay. I also think that lucid dreaming, and this is where, and some people will just be like, that's all that astral travel is. Okay. I tend to think of the astral experience as existing on a huge continuum. Okay. So maybe at the one end of the spectrum, you have like the shamanic experience, the out of body experience where you're flatlining on the table and you leave your body. Okay. That's another way to do it, by the way. To have an out of body experience is to almost die. Okay. So, we're on that end of the spectrum. And then I think that and then we have consensus reality, like you and I right now having this conversation. You could say that might be on the other end of the spectrum. And then there's this huge, beautiful amorphous space that I feel like is the astral plane. And really what it is it's the realm of ideas. And again, there are a million people who will disagree with me here. But I feel like if you get really absorbed in a good book, and the space-time continuum breaks down, okay? Like where it feels like 10 minutes have passed, but like 2 hours has passed, I think you're kind of hanging out in the astral. I do think you're hanging out in the astral when you are lucid dreaming, when you're in dream state. I actually think dream state is more over here than it is over here, to be honest. I also feel that the realm of active imagination, in terms of where you take yourself on a mental journey, after meditating, you're going on an astral journey. You may not have separated from the body, as it were, but you're in that space of liminality. You're no longer concretely in consensus reality, and you've taken a step outside of that. And I think sometimes when you fall into really, really big ideas, you've taken a step into that realm of ideas. Plato calls it the realm of, or Socrates, Plato calls it the realm of forms. You've got the realm of the physical, and you have the realm of forms, which is basically the realm of ideas. And I kind of jive with that because we're all, you hear people say like, we're all like physical beings having a spiritual experience. For me, at least, until I find a better word for it, one that kind of, flows with the paradigm of witchcraft and the occult and that jazz. I think that the astral realm is all of that. And, I think premonitions can even, you can get into that space where you're detached and you're interfacing with something completely different. But I mean, in terms of what it is that I do, I definitely feel like my approach is often of the active imagination sort, which is a Jungian concept where you kind of sit and you start a guided meditation. You may land in the landing zone, then you go on a trip, okay? And it could be something that still feels like it's happening in here. But for me, just because it feels like it's localized doesn't mean that it actually is. If that makes any sense whatsoever. Like I just don't see why we have to separate the mind and the body in order for this to be considered an astral trip.
Interesting. Okay. That makes me feel like less of a loser because I've had like no luck at all doing astral projection, but I'm very good at doing kind of like active imagination, a guided journey. And I feel like whenever I've done like sort of a guided meditation like that, or I would call it a self-guided because I don't like necessarily listen to a tape, but I just kind of go on my own inner journey. And to me, it feels kind of similar to dreaming, but you're sort of more aware. It's like kind of dreaming when you're awake a little bit. And what kinds of things, because I think for some people, like they are just naturally drawn to go on those kinds of trips and they don't have any difficulty, imagining themselves in different places and interacting with different entities. What kinds of things help you get into that mindset? And do you ever have a hard time getting into that mindset?
I would say that I don't necessarily have a very hard time getting into that mindset, at least just crossing over. Like when you talk of the out of body experience, like that can kind of take a lot of effort. Okay. And again, it's a continuum. It's a continuum kind of a thing. If you really want to have like an experience in terms of like the out of body, I think it's really important, maybe even to just listen to a drum, beat a drum. And again, I don't really necessarily want to share some of these approaches or techniques that I use within the context of my own practice because it's very much, like there are shamanic practices that are, that are very much the outcropping of a very specific culture, and that like the cultural practice surrounding it should very much be honored. So I think that's a reason why people say astral projection rather than shamanic journeying, because shamanic journeying to me at least seems to be very much anchored in a cultural practice. It very, very deep form of meditation. It has to do with like different layers of letting go. But if we're talking about the imaginal experience, which I think is so entirely valid. Like, I think if you're in imaginal space having conversations with entities that like pop up and appear to you, and then you come back from that space and you identify them as archetypes, and the conversations you have, like you have to spend time like looking at it and picking it apart, and you find symbols in there that you didn't know what they meant, but then you go look up at the symbol and like something's happening there. It's a deeply valuable experience, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And if you're looking to have that experience, and one that I think is a little bit more accessible, I do think it's a little bit more accessible to more people. One of the things that you can actually do is read fiction is one of the things that I definitely recommend. When we talk about practices and exercising that muscle, and again, if you are someone who reads and doesn't get a mental picture, doesn't get a movie in your head, this may be harder for you, because this is something I've discovered through having many conversations with different people about what happens when they read and what happens and how they can't actually really do active imagination because they cannot visualize, in their mind's eye. But if you're someone who can, and who does when they read, if you see like the movie, I'd say reading fiction, it exercises like that muscle like you would not believe. It makes it so much easier to just sit down and just to be in that space. And it also makes it a lot easier for you to get carried away. I also recommend too, because there have been so many people who've come to me and they're like, I don't know how to astral travel. I don't know. But then I start like, listing these scenarios and like, oh, I do that. Or like, oh, I do that. Like, oh, I have like an hour-long conversation, in the space with an entity that I was just like.
I do that too. I have conversation. It feels like I'm having a conversation in my head with an imaginary person.
Yeah.
I never thought of it as being like in the astral realm though.
And the thing is, again, I'm sure a million people will disagree with me. I see the astral as ideas. I see it as the realm of ideas. And again, a million people, and it's almost like I don't even want to say it, okay? Because I don't want everyone, because everyone will come at me and tell me in a million ways that I'm wrong. And the thing is, I also want to say, just because I think of something doesn't necessarily negate what someone else thinks. And that's another, I'm gonna make that video too. And I'm like, just because I think this doesn't mean that I'm saying what you do is wrong.
Yeah, you're not saying this is how it is. You're saying this is how I think of it. This is my conceptualization of this.
This is my conceptualization of this, and I'm sharing this because a lot of people have felt really left out of this experience, and they're like, oh wait, there's a space here for me too. I feel seen. I literally had someone tell me, I feel seen the other day watching that video, while someone else said, read a book on astral projection. You don't know what you're talking about. So like, it's always going to be a wealth of feedback, but if you're having problems with the out of body, like you said, it's just something that's not there for you. Maybe it's not right now. Keep trying, but it's also how awesome is having a conversation with an imaginal entity for an hour?
I think also like just being able to daydream is super important. And I think that's something that most of us don't really do. Like we don't make time for that. I think most people are just so overscheduled and like, with work and chores and stuff like that. I find that for a lot of people, it's hard to find the time to just daydream. But I feel like that practice has been so helpful to me in, just in getting like great ideas for things. Like, I don't get good ideas for things by sitting there trying to think of them. I just sort of let my mind wander. And it's amazing where your mind will take you when you just let it wander and there's no like agenda.
That's why I say it's astral travel. You're taking a trip.
Yeah.
It's amazing where your mind will take you when you let it wander. Yes, it is. It takes you on a trip. You can call it mind. If astral, I might even just start calling it mind tripping, just to like avoid any sort of confusion. It's taking a mind trip. I don't know. That's something I have to. I'm in a space of liminality where I'm like figuring a lot of things out, and where I'm making like a lot of like conscious decisions about how I'm going to proceed. And that's one where I might change my wording so as to avoid confusion.
I like that phrase, mind tripping. That sounds cool. Can you tell us a little bit about your tarot summer school course?
Yes, I can. My tarot summer school, my tarot summer school course is the Mind Witch's Guide to Tarot Magic. And really, this is a course that gives you somewhat of a beginner's guide on how to navigate the tarot deck in terms of its relationship with magic and how to use it as a portal for magical experience. So we definitely use the tarot, and we take, the major arcana and look at them in their relationship with deity, and vice versa. Maybe you have a deity in mind, and you lay out the cards. You're like, well, which of these cards does my deity, is reflected in my deity as a means of actually deepening relationship with deity. That's one, element of the course. And we do path working as a, as a way to help develop astral consciousness. And again, for me, astral consciousness is the consciousness of the realm of forms, of the imaginal realm, okay? And we take a look at, we definitely do like a call and answer in terms of tarot and deity. Tarot and deity is just, they go together. I think I even said they go together like peanut butter and jelly. They just do. Oh my goodness. But maybe that's my experience because I came to tarot and deity work at about the same time. But we also, I printed it all out because I don't know if for you, if it's hard to recall like everything of a thing, especially when you are sitting and talking to somebody about it.
Yeah, totally.
Very, very hard for me. Like people are like, what do you do? Everyone's like, you've got to have that line. I'm like,
yeah.
I was like, I know what I do, but I don't know how to say it. But yeah, like we develop and we do tarot journaling in terms of like call and response. I know that this is, I actually am interested in, I know I'm kind of flipping the script here, but your course isn't live yet. So I'm actually interested in how you approach the tarot journaling practice as well. Because I do a little bit, and it's very so basic what I do. It's just like a call and response, and it's very intuitive in that regard. But I'm
yeah. So it's funny because I created my course like 3 months ago, I guess. And I can't remember anything in my course. Like
that's why because I made it a long time ago.
I do remember that. I basically think that there's sort of different types of tarot journaling. Like there's a type of tarot journaling where it's more of like a study guide where you kind of create your own book of meanings, where you look at each card, you write down the symbols, you write down kind of your take on the card, and then you can use that book as kind of a reference. So there's that's kind of like very basic, kind of a studious way to do a tarot journal.
That's how I started that's when I was learning tarot. I had a tarot journal to help me learn the meanings of the cards.
Yeah, the basic nuts and bolts of tarot. And then there's the kind of tarot journaling where you would journal about, what's going on in your life, and you would ask your deck questions like, what should I do about this, or whatever. And then you look at the card and you then journal about it, and you write kind of what's popping into your mind, what you think the card is saying to you. And there's another way to journal that I talk about in the course. And for the life of me, it's like not even in my mind right now. I can't even.
I just remember, like, oh, we make a tarot sigil candle too. Anyway.
Oh, that's cool.
It's like it comes to me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you did this whole cool thing about like tarot sigil candles and stuff like that. But,
that's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's always hard. It makes me a little bit happy inside to have like, because some people are just like, oh, like have like this Rolodex of like, I'm like I was like, I have to print this out, because as soon as I stop, I'm like, oh, I didn't mention those 6 things. Whoops.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the card scrying, and yeah, I'm trying to scripting with conscious card pools. This is actually pretty cool. You can like consciously pull cards to create like a story arc.
Oh yeah, I love doing that.
Yeah, and to to do it in the form of scripting where you are writing the life that you want. So like, write a story but make it magic kind of thing, where like you make the decision and you write about yourself in the first person, like, I am doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing that, and you use tarot cards as like a helpful reference point, as like a structure to kind of help you to write that story in a way that makes sense. So,
and that's all in your course?
Yes.
Oh, cool. Okay, because I was going to do a thing on storytelling with tarot, but I axed it from my course because it was way too long. Like I had too much stuff, and I'm like, I'll leave that out. So I'm glad you have it.
Well, see, and this is what I've done with my course too. It's almost like it's a beginner's primer. Like it doesn't take one topic and go really, really deeply into it, in terms of like, for example, like you could devote an entire course to storytelling with the tarot. Okay, that's like its own thing. For me here, I wanted to say, like, here are some aspects of magic in terms of consciousness, and here are some of like the basic, what I see as like fundamental building blocks of a magical practice. You've got astral travel, you've got scrying and path working. These are all designed to get these practices are kind of designed to have you be in that space of the mind. If you're chatting with deity and doing deity communication, like you're not here, you're here. And what I provide are like very like basic, but like immediately actionable ways to do this very simply. And it does rely on the individual to practice. And that's what I find is sometimes really hard when it comes to teaching spirituality. Okay. Because you can say a heck of a lot, and you can give people, like, a lot of this is actually not super uber complicated, and it's just reliant upon the person to take their own journey with it. And with the mind witch thing, it's all about a spirited exploration of consciousness. There are portals. There are portals that you can access, through which you can go. And I guess I'm kind of trying to give portals here. It's like pathworking a card is a portal to astral consciousness. Chatting with deity is a portal to understanding maybe even your shadow aspects, different parts of yourself, and also understanding, more archetypal primal symbols that govern the human experience. All of these things are doors. They're doors. And it's sometimes I feel like I'm Morpheus over here being like, all I can do is show you the door, and like you're the one who has to walk through it. And
your course sounds so fun. Like I'm super excited to do it. As soon as I was reading the description of your course and you said something about astral journeying with the cards, I was like, oh yeah, I want to try this course.
The tarot is such a beautiful it's a beautiful tool for magic. And for me, it always has been. And I think it's because I came to magic and witchcraft and tarot at the same time. So the two have always been related for me. And I'm
going to ask you a bit about that. But first, I just want to tell people that are listening, I'm going to put the links to Jessi's course just below this video if you want to check it out. So I want to ask you about like how you came to this work, because you said you came to kind of all this stuff kind of at once. Like were you always into this kind of stuff, or was there a time in your life where you discovered all this like witchy tarot magical stuff?
So part of me was always into this, but I very much kept it over here because I was like, at 14, I'm like, I'm an atheist. And I very much followed the path of like philosophy and critical theory, and remained heavily skeptical. But I also didn't realize that this couldn't be suppressed. Like when we talk about mind tripping or astral traveling, which some people do think it's astral traveling, maybe we all need to get together and have a conversation like they do at the academy and come to a consensus. But like I would do when I was 14, it was amazing because when I was like, I'm an atheist, I started practicing all of this stuff, not under it's not really, I wasn't crafting spells, but for like an hour and a half to 2 hours every night before I fell asleep, I was going on mind trips. I started going to sleep earlier and earlier because I was looking so forward to them and they were so much fun. So it's kind of, yeah, like, and I was a student of literature. And if I studied literature in college with a specialization in critical theory, and I was introduced to Jung through my coursework, and like introduced to the tarot. I knew tarot existed, but introduced to his relationship with tarot through my coursework. So it was always something that was definitely there, but it was more so there as a concept than it was as an actual practice. And I'd say it became an actual practice when I became a mother. And there was direct correlation for a number of reasons. One being that I had gotten to a point where I very much wanted to make sure that the mistakes of the past, that I did everything I could, at least to not make the same mistakes of the past, to kind of break some cycles that I recognized. And I was like, well, if I'm really going to do this, like I have to fix this first. So it almost like kind of, there's like a sense of urgency in terms of my own spiritual development, because monkey see, monkey do. I was like, oh, I'm responsible for this other being and like how they grow and how they evolve. So I kind of got to get my shit together. And I also didn't necessarily feel empowered through motherhood in the way that many women do. it felt, you know, it was very challenging for me because I had so defined myself by my mind and by being a single entity, by being myself and having my thoughts and doing my scholarship. And like, this is who I am. And then now I was part of like a trinity, and I didn't really know how to be a part of that. And so there was, magic came in the form of a spell to create boundaries. That was really the first spell that I cast, was a spell to try to maintain boundaries. And then the study of tarot was very organic, because again, I knew character types. Like I'd studied this. So like, I'm like, oh yeah, that's that archetype, or that's that. Not to suggest that studying the tarot is ever easy, because it's not. Because it takes concerted effort, okay? But that I definitely had a strong foundation in terms of archetypes, stories, the hero's journey, for example. Deeply familiar with the hero's journey. So yeah, that and things just kind of blossomed organically. And it was one of those things where sometimes in order for a revolution, I forget whose definition this is, but in order for a revolution to take place, what you have to gain has to be more than what it is that you stand to lose. And I felt like, you know what, I've been an atheist for this long. I feel like I'm in a space where whatever, I'm willing to try. I'm willing to try. I'm willing to look at things differently. I'm willing to invite this in, because I feel like what I have to gain through trying this is a lot more than I have to lose by changing.
And so how would you describe the work that you do? Because I know you have your coven, you've got e-courses and all that, and you've got your YouTube channel. And your YouTube channel, by the way, for those watching, is fantastic. If you haven't already checked out Jessi's YouTube channel, you will love it. It's a lot of fun. So how would you describe the work that you do? Do you primarily see yourself as a teacher? Do you do readings? Like, how do you work with people?
I see myself as a teacher now. And it's funny that you asked, because it was really like 2 days ago. I'm like, it really is. I am teaching. I was very uncomfortable with the teacher thing, because I didn't want to place myself in some sort of position where I felt like, here, I have the knowledge, you don't, and you have to come to me to get the knowledge. And there was that kind of, I had like a bit of like a stigma surrounding that. I just didn't want to be like a gatekeeper, or even suggest that, but I finally was like, I'm offering what it is that I know. I'm offering my wisdom. I'm offering what it is that I've learned through active experience. And yeah, I teach. I basically what I do through the Mind Witch Coven is I create rituals and spell tutorials every month that are centered around a theme, and I'll do an exploration of that theme. So, next month it's going to be the magical art of receiving. I'll do like a video where I just talk about my relationship with that, my personal experience. I might talk about the concept. Then I will create a ritual or a series of spells that, like, when done in conjunction with each other, constitutes like a much longer ritual, and then provide a tutorial for that. And with the Mind Witch Academy, that's where we get into a little bit more of the theory and the practice. So whereas with the coven, I'm giving you like, here's the spell, here's the tool, here's this, go forth and do. With the Mind Witch Academy, we go into more depth. Like, I have the Spellbound e-course, which really, if you don't know what magic is, I'd say it is a very direct and clear way to get a foundation on the magical experience and like what a spell is very quickly, if it's something that you're unfamiliar with. I'd say it's I kind of distilled it down. With the Lunar Alchemy e-course, it's basically like it's a cycle. We go through the moon cycle, and we do things like creating mood boards and doing dark moon meditation, guided meditations and reflections, and sometimes tarot spreads and whatnot. And it's basically like designed around the the moon and the correspondences of the different phases. So it's just like kind of like a snapshot. Really what I'm doing is I'm trying to act as like a teacher or a spirited guide, sharing what I know, sharing what's worked for me, sharing certain tools, approaches, to help people develop spiritually, using magic. Almost always there's some magic in there. Whether it's a spell or, you know, it's astral, it's within that, under that umbrella, within that paradigm, witchcraft, magic. It's usually the approaches that I'm going for.
Nice.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I don't think I've ever explained that so concisely in the 5 years I've been doing this.
So what called you to do this kind of work? Because it's one thing to be like a solo practitioner and just explore this stuff on your own. And it's quite another thing to want to share it with others and teach. So what did you have a moment where you felt called, or was it just sort of a general feeling where you felt called to work with others?
It's something I've always done. You know, as I began, as my plug falls out, as I began very much as a tarot reader. I was the person that people would come to for advice since about the age of 16 or 17. So, you know, I was it an active calling? Perhaps it was just something I enjoyed doing. Like I liked listening to people. I liked giving them the benefit of my personal experience or even my thoughts, you know, and then letting them do what they could. I liked helping them in that way. And, you know, I actually, I was a tutor for a while. I got certified to teach English literature for high school. And I never actually ended up going into the school system because even as I was getting certified, I knew that I didn't want to teach books. It was something different. But I tutored, I did reading remediation for a really long time. I did English as a second language tutoring. So I've kind of always been teaching, but even as I was tutoring ESL students, high school students who had come over from China to live here, like I found that I was being much more engaged with their experience. I'm like, what is your experience here? You know, what are you struggling with? I didn't really want to teach them history. I was like, how is it to be away from your family at the tender age of 17 and be in an American school when you do not have enough English skills to even know what's going on? Like it was always, for me, it was always like, what's your experience? How can I help? And it always has been kind of a thing. And you know, whereas before it was very much one-on-one, as things have shifted and evolved, although I do still read tarot for a very select group of people. And I may be opening myself up in the future for more of a one-on-one session situation. It's become very rewarding for me to kind of like distill what it is that I know and actually offer it to, you know, a greater audience, obviously through the YouTube channel. Like it's just, it's almost easier. You know, you can talk to one person and tell them all the stuff, or you can say the things and offer it and let it hopefully, you know, help more people, or at least even if they just enjoy it, even if it's just interesting to them, even if it's just a way to pass the time, even if people just like doing spell work because it's fun, like I'm also fine with that. Like I'm gonna offer what it is that I want to put out there. And even if they disagree and it makes them realize that they think differently about something than they thought they did, like even that, it's just like sometimes just putting it out there is just.
So where can people find you if they want to find out more about what you do?
You can find me at www.jessihuntenburg.com. That is the hub from which everything else springs. And also you can still find me. I'm Mind Witch Mama at YouTube, and I'm also Mind Witch Mama at Instagram. And honestly, those are the 3 places at this point where I hang out most often.
Awesome. I'm going to make sure I put all the links below this video. So thank you so much for chatting with me today, Jessi. I've loved our conversation. I've loved diving into all those weird topics that I don't normally get to chat with my family and friends.
Thank you for humoring me, because not everyone is willing. So I really appreciate it. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts with me as well. It's awesome. Thank you so much.